Good morning, Year 8. Welcome to Wednesday's video lesson. Today we are going to continue reading and studying The Pedestrian by Bradbury. Before we get into reading, can you please copy down the title, the date, and the learning objective? Pause the video and press play when you have those three things copied down, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to complete the Do Now task. I would like you to answer these 5 questions in full sentences, please. If you need to go back to yesterday's video lesson or yesterday's notes to help you, you can do that or try and do it from memory. Pause the video and complete the Do Now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to make your purple pen corrections. As always, give it a tick if you got it right, and if you got it wrong, just make sure you make the correct answer. So, the story is set in 2053 AD. Leonard loves to go walking. Inside their houses, people are watching TV. Leonard wears sneakers when he is walking. He doesn't wear any kind of shoe with a heel anymore because it startles the dogs and the people in the houses. And we can conclude from the evidence that the story is set in the USA. Pause the video and make any corrections that you need to now, please. Okay, so last lesson we learned about exposition and falling action. Today we're going to learn about the climax and the falling action. So, a climax is the highest point of tension in the text. It's often when the most intriguing, exciting, and interesting part of the text takes place. And then the falling action occurs immediately after the climax, and this is when the main problem of the story begins to get resolved, to get fixed. So if we go back to our story arc, we can plot these new parts of our story. So we know at the beginning the first step is, you should have remembered that it's the exposition. And then after the exposition we have the rising action, which is the build up to the most important part, which we now know is the climax. And then opposite to rising action, we have falling action. So we read the exposition and the rising action, and today we're going to read the climax and the falling action, and we're going to learn what happens in those parts. So let's get into it. He turned back on a side street, circling around towards his home. He was within a block of his destination when the lone car, so single car, turned a corner quite suddenly and flashed a fierce white cone of light upon him. He stood, entranced, not unlike a night moth, stunned by the illumination and then drawn towards it. So Leonard here is compared to a moth. Moths are attracted by light. And he stood entranced, almost stunned by the light of this car like a moth. A metallic voice called to him. And now here is a little bit confusing. The car is described as kind of a metallic voice. Stand still, stay where you are, don't move. He halted, meaning he stopped. Put up your hands. But, he said, your hands up, or we'll shoot. The police, of course. But what a rare, incredible thing. In a city of 3 million, there was only one police car left. Wasn't that correct? Ever since a year ago, 2052, the election year, the force had been cut down from 3 cars to 1. Crime was ebbing. There was no need now for the police, save for this one lone car wandering the empty streets. Your name? Said the police car in a metallic whisper. He couldn't see the men in it for the bright light in his eyes. So, in this dystopian futuristic place, the policemen haven't got out the car and shouted at the man. The police car itself is having this metallic whisper. We saw earlier it being described as a metallic voice. Leonard Mead, he said. Speak up. Leonard Mead. Business or profession? I guess you'd call me a writer. No profession, said the police car, as if talking to itself. The light held him, fixed, like a museum specimen needle thrust through chest. So when things are delivered to a museum, they're often kind of prodded and poked by the people who work there, so they can understand a little bit more about what the thing is. So it's kind of this idea that he's almost trapped by the lights, as the museum specimens are trapped by the needle through their chests. You might say that, said Mr. Mead. He hadn't written in years. Magazines and books didn't sell anymore. That's a really important idea. Magazines and books didn't sell anymore, so the only things that people could read were things kind of produced and approved by the government. Everything went on in the tomb-like houses at night now, he thought, continuing his fancy. The tombs, ill-lit by television light, where the people sat like the dead, the grey or multicoloured lights touching their faces, but never really touching them. No profession, said the phonograph voice, hissing. What are you doing out? Walking, said Leonard Mead. Walking? Just walking, he said simply, but his face felt cold. Walking. Just walking. Walking. Yes, sir. Walking where? For what? Walking for air. Walking to see. Your address? 11th South St. James Street. And there is air in your house? You have an air conditioner, Mr. Mead? Yes. And you have a viewing screen in your house to see with? No. A viewing screen obviously meaning a television. No. No? There was a crackling quiet that in itself was an accusation. Are you married, Mr. Mead? No. Not married, said the police voice behind the fiery beam. The moon was high and clear among the stars, and the houses were grey and silent. Nobody wanted me, said Leonard with a smile. Don't speak unless you're spoken to. Leonard Mead waited in the cold night. Just walking, Mr. Mead. Yes. Yes. But you haven't explained for what purpose. I explained. For air, to see, and just to walk. Have you done this often? Every night for years. The police car sat in the centre of the street with its radio throat faintly humming. Well, Mr. Mead, it said. Is that all? He asked politely. Yes, said the voice. Here. There was a sigh, a pop. The back door of the police car sprang wide. Get in. Wait a minute. I haven't done anything. Get in. I protest, Mr. Mead. He walked like a man suddenly drunk. As he passed the front window of the car, he looked in. As he expected, there was no one in the front seat, no one in the car at all. Again, this futuristic idea where this car is patrolling the streets on its own and speaking to people and, controlling everyone. Get in. He put his hand to the door and peered into the back seat, which was a little cell, a little black jail with bars. It smelled of riveled steel. It smelled of harsh antiseptic. It smelled too clean and hard and metallic. There was nothing soft there. Now, if you had a wife to give you an alibi, said the iron voice. But where are you taking me? The car hesitated, or rather gave a faint whirring click, as if information somewhere was dropping card by punch-slotted card under electric eyes. So the idea here is that someone's there listening, controlling the car. To the Psychiatric Centre for Research on Regressive Tendencies. So a regressive tendency is where someone does something that goes against the norm. So in this example, Leonard Mead has gone against the norm and what the government expects by walking around. And they think that's strange. So they're going to send him to a psychiatric centre just for walking. He got in. The door shut with a soft thud. The police car rolled through the night avenues, flashing its dim lights ahead. They passed one house on one street a moment later. One house in an entire city of houses that were dark. But this one particular house had all of its electric lights brightly lit, every window a loud yellow illumination, square and warm in the cool darkness. "That's my house," said Leonard Mead. No one answered him. The car moved down the empty riverbed streets and off away, leaving the empty streets, with the empty sidewalks, and no sound, and no motion, all the rest of the chill November night. Okay, so we just read the climax and then the falling action. So we're going to go into detail about each of those sections now. For the climax, I would like you to complete this sentence starter and copy this table. So for the sentence starter, you need to write the climax in the story is when, and explain to me in what moment of what we've just read did you feel the most tense? What was the highest point of tension where the story went from being calm and Leonard walking around to something quite intense? When was that moment? And then copy this table down. Make sure that you do have 3 of these spaces. I probably recommend that you use about half a page to write this table down. Pause the video and complete both of these tasks now, please. Okay, so let's just look at the sentence starter. Grab your purple pen. And you should have written something about the fact that the climax of the story is when the police car arrives. Something along that line there. I just realised how bad my handwriting of arrives is. It's just, it's quite hard to write on a screen. I mean, I do try my best. I try my best. Oh God. The car arrives. That's a bit better. So pause the video now and make sure you have your sentence which says something about the climax being when the police car arrives. Okay, so you should have made that correction, and you should also have this table down. Now, this table is going to help us analyse the climax of The Pedestrian, so we can understand how Bradbury creates tension, how we feel tense. And this is the climax of the story. This is the part where the police car arrives and we hear the metallic voice of the car. You're going to use this section to fill in that table. Okay, I'm going to do one with you. So grab your pen now and you're going to write along with me. So remember, methods are things like similes, metaphors, personification, juxtaposition, repetition, imagery. We've looked at these for quite a while now, but I just wanted to give you a reminder. So to answer the question about how Bradbury creates tension, we're going to choose quotes, we're going to choose what method it is, what does it suggest, and then how does this create tension. So I'm looking at my extract now, and I'm firstly going to choose my quote. So I'm going to look at the metaphor here. The light held him fixed, like a museum specimen needle thrust through his chest. Sorry, not a metaphor, a simile. Remember, a simile uses the words like and as to make a comparison between two things. So I would write this quote in here. So I'm going to just write, the light held him ... Okay. Just so I know what I'm writing about. So can you pause the video and in that first box, write the quote that I've highlighted and circled in red down, please? Okay, so you should have that quote written down in your box. I'm just going to rub that out. Okay, now I need to identify what method it is, and I just said from the word like that this is a simile. So pause the video and jot that down in your table as well, please. Okay, now the most important part. What does this simile suggest? So this simile says that the light held Leonard fixed, like a museum specimen needle thrust through his chest. So it's comparing the way that Leonard reacts to the police car's light to the way that an insect or an animal is pinned to like a board in the museum, or even like when it's inspected and they put needles through it to kind of check what's inside and see what it's like. So this kind of suggests that Leonard is trapped. And kind of like with no hope of escape. Because if you're an animal or an insect at a museum, chances are that you're probably dead, and also you're not going to be able to move from where you are. Leonard is trapped with no hope of escape. Okay, pause the video and jot that down in your gap in your table. Okay, now how does it create tension? Obviously we feel tense here because we suspect that perhaps Leonard won't be able to free himself from the police car, much like the insect and the animal who's being inspected by the museum. It creates tension. We have a feeling that he won't escape the police car. All right, pause the video and finish the table now, please. Okay, and as you can see, we still have 2 spaces in our table, which means that in the climax on the screen, there are still 2 methods that we need to find. You're going to do this independently, but I am going to give you a hint that there is another simile, and there is also personification. So I would like you quickly, for about 30 seconds, pause the video, reread the climax on the screen, and can you spot the simile and the personification? Do that now. Okay, so hopefully you would have figured out that the simile is here. He stood in trance, not unlike a night moth stunned by the illumination. And we spoke about that earlier, how moths are attracted to light, and Leonard is stood like a moth staring at the police car. And the personification is the metallic voice. The car is personified as a metallic voice. So you now know the next 2 quotes, the method, and now you need to analyse by writing what does it suggest and how does this create tension. Can you pause the video and spend about 5 minutes completing this table now? Okay, if you're back, that means you've completed the table. I look forward to seeing all of your excellent ideas. Now we need to look at the falling action. So we're going to complete some sentences based on the falling action to answer the question, how does the ending depict the dystopian world? So this is that section of the text. So could you please pause the video and reread this now to remind yourself? Okay, so now you're going to complete the sentences here. So you're going to write, in the falling action, it is clearly a dystopian world because you need to describe how it's dystopian. So you need to consider what happens to Leonard because he is walking. Where are they planning on sending him? And then you can write that quotation here. Then you're going to write, furthermore, Leonard's house is portrayed as. So remember, they drive past his house and it has all the lights on. So describe what the house looks like. and then embed the quotation. In the final lines, there is a gloomy atmosphere because. Describe how the final lines create a gloomy atmosphere. What's the mood like? And then you're going to embed a quotation. Pause the video and spend 10 minutes completing this task now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you completed this task and you are ready to submit. I remember to put the slide in today. Please make sure that you send your work to my email. The subject needs to look like this, and this is a reminder of how you need to submit your work, but we should all know that by now. Pause the video on this screen as a reminder, submit your work, and when you've done that, you can X off the video and continue with your lessons. I look forward to seeing all of your amazing hard work. Well done.